Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the diDNA Dialogue. My name's Josh, and today we've got Nick Cote, the Director of Publisher Development over at Dailymotion. Nick, to kick us off, can you share a little bit about yourself and background in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Pisces. I love long walks on the beach. Oh, you didn't want my dating profile. Okay. I live up here in Brooklyn, New York, with my wife, 2 dogs, love getting out, exploring the city. Recently got a place up in Vermont, so we're able to go and enjoy the mountains too sometimes, which is really awesome. But yeah, as it relates to the industry, I've been in ad tech for too long, as most people in ad tech would probably say. About a dozen years now. I've been on the buy side, sell side, content rec networks at SSPs, DSPs, and now in my current gig at Dailymotion, really diving into the video side of things. So seen a lot in the day, but no, it's just really exciting to sort of be tackling what's really the fastest growing medium and type of content that people are consuming these days.
Yeah, for real. And how long is too long, right? It seems like 12 isn't that right number yet.
No. I mean, my last job when I was at this company called Sport Radar was my first foray into the, doing some ad tech related things, but also some more, I guess what you'd call like traditional SaaS type offering things as it relates to sports APIs and offerings there. But I came crawling back. To the ad tech dark side. So, but no, it's been great. I mean, I think the beauty of our industry is just the people that you get to meet, and some of as most people would say, it's so ever evolving that the challenge that you face tomorrow is completely different than what it was 3 months ago, which is completely different than it was, 2 years ago. Right. I think everyone now is like, oh, contextual, which is so 2013. But then, right, I think just sometimes things just end up coming full circle. And I think that's part of the beauty of the industry in which we work.
Yeah, for sure. So can you talk a little bit about Dailymotion? Because even a couple of weeks ago, talking with you, I was familiar with Dailymotion as a publisher, but I wasn't familiar with some of the products and services you guys offer. So maybe explain a little bit about how Dailymotion and you fit into the industry.
Absolutely. So, I mean, like you sort of alluded to right there, we are a publisher. We see something like 250 million monthly uniques globally. A lot of that, being a French-owned organization, our parent company is Vivendi, who also owns the likes of Universal Music Group, which I assume most people have heard of, Havas, the ad agency, Gameloft, which is a major game developer, Canal Plus, which is a major broadcaster and cable operator over in France. But really, in addition to the publishing side of things, right, I'd say that we're very similar to a variety of the different video hosting services and distribution platforms. But what we're starting to do now is take all of this technology that we've built around our B2C experience. When people go to dailymotion.com, what are they seeing? How are they interacting with content? How can they share that video content? And really turning that into a true B2B offering from a technology side, from a player offering perspective, and from creating syndication opportunities, for different video content creators out there, whether you're, an influencer that's trying to, push their content and create new audiences, or if you're an established media brand where you're just looking for additional distribution channels off of your own O&O. That's where we're sort of trying to, push some of our offerings, whether that's syndicating your content across, third-party publishers, whether that's just having and hosting a Dailymotion channel for your own content on our O&O, or if you actually want to use the player tech, on your own site. We're doing a lot of interesting stuff these days as it relates to live streaming, adaptive streaming, understanding, or is Josh on 5G, or is he still using, a nice little, 56K dial-up action on his, laptop. It does feel like it sometimes, especially in these COVID days when I have no idea how many people are stealing my internet right now, but I have to imagine it's a couple because it's a heck of a lot slower than it was a couple weeks ago.
Right.
But yeah, so really our goal is to just figure out how can we help video content creators better distribute and monetize the content they create.
That's excellent. Well put. I want to dive into the video piece. I really do, because the video side, I think even for us, because we work with a bunch of publishers, we've seen that really start to expand, but people are still kind of figuring it out. I wouldn't just say on the publisher side either. I think it's the SSPs, DSPs, everybody else is trying to figure it out too. But before jumping in there, I do want to hear your reasoning really to go and jump back into the ad tech space, right? You talked, you got pulled back in, but I'd love to know, like, what was your reasoning, thought process behind it? Why Dailymotion?
Really, for me, I've in the previous, X years of time in the space, it's always been, a banner ad, a content rec unit, something that's very linear in it's displayed, you click it, you end up on a landing page, and then there's an action, right? Whether that's you make a sale, or in the content rec space, a lot of that is the traffic exchanging and things like that. So the opportunity to sort of dive and understand a medium like video, first, that is it's something like the amount of video content that's available on the internet is like quadrupling like every couple days or something wild like that. And just to understand the intricacies of how it all operates, how are what you'd call like, your traditional linear broadcasters starting to adapt into the more digital ecosystem, things that weren't addressable before in linear TV and stuff like that. Now, all of a sudden, because it's digital, because it's flowing through, this new set of pipes and infrastructure, like people are able to identify, like, Nielsen ratings are no longer the sole, owner of people's attention, and measuring where people can actually find valuable viewership. And that's something that just super intrigued me, being a hardcore streamer myself. I definitely hit peak subscription like a month into the pandemic, like, Paramount Plus, Peacock, Netflix, Hulu, the entire Disney bundle. I'm pretty sure there's nothing that I haven't really seen on those yet, which is kind of sad to admit, but simultaneously, it just goes to show, like, in this, like, obviously very weird times in which we've all lived in the last year and a half, just like how people's time has shifted in regards to how it's spent. What are they focusing on? Would I rather watch a minute video clip, or would I rather read an article, that takes me 7 to 10 minutes, right? And I think that, especially as, the millennial generation and younger folk continue to sort of, expand their foothold, in both, the social platforms, like the TikToks that have exploded. Instagram used to just be pictures, right? And now most of the content I see on Instagram these days is video content. So really, for me, the opportunity to join Dailymotion was probably the pinnacle of learning experiences that I could have chosen. Because we have our own OTT CTV app, that for Dailymotion specifically, that is one type of video and everything that goes on in there. We have our own online video player solution and all of the technical intricacies that are, surround that. And then even getting to work at a publisher was also something that I thought was going to be particularly valuable. Understanding the importance of how are we leveraging the future of user identity to make sure that we're accurately serving content to the correct people and serving them stuff that they actually want to view. So, and not only the user identity piece, but then you also have, the distribution component of learning how is every media organization really globally, because we are certainly an international organization with people on pretty much every continent. Minus Antarctica. We'll get there though once the streaming numbers are up. But no, what works and what the focuses are in North America varies tremendously from what the focuses are in APAC, from EMEA, from LATAM. So being able to sort of work in one place, yet see all of those different viewpoints and focuses was something that I just, I'm just not sure that I would have been able to replicate elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned working at a publisher, working with a publisher. I'm curious how that's actually influenced the way that you approach the video solution that Dailymotion has too. Is that something that you take into account when you're talking to some of these publishers that are your primary target? I'm assuming they're your primary target, so maybe you can provide a little clarity there too. But how does it impact the way you present that video solution working at a publisher?
I think the biggest thing that I've sort of taken away, in my first, few months here is certainly that there's no one size fits all solution. Everybody sort of wants to go about and have something that's, unique to them and addressing their specific needs, right? So we might have a broadcaster that wants to come on board that's super focused on making sure that they're able to deliver high quality live stream content, right? Whereas you have other publishers in the space that, are still at, a point in maturity where, they don't have the resources to necessarily create their own video content. Yet how can they still go about leveraging the power of video? How can they bring in video related revenues? How can they leverage video to keep users on site longer? And sort of and being at a publisher, it's allowed me to understand a lot of now the things that are coming up with how Google's adjusting, things like cumulative layout shift and core web vitals and those types of focuses. So things like the importance of page load speed, the weight of the player, how many ad calls are being sent out from a player, all of those types of things are things that I don't want to say I necessarily took for granted before, but it's kind of finally like being at a publisher, you actually see the numerical impact that, a second of page load time can have dramatic, influence, over the performance at the end of the day. So those were some things I feel like I've gotten like being at a publisher that before wouldn't have, crossed my mind, sure, because, being in the space, yeah, I read Ad Exchanger and all of the publications out there of what's coming down the pipe. Okay, cookies are now being held off from deprecation for another couple of years. But it's one where like once you're actually in the weeds and you can see the data, I think that's really where you start to like finally like the light bulb goes off and you do understand like how important that is for any publisher that wants to leverage video, in their particular experiences.
Right. And that's, from one sales guy to another, like that's some powerful stuff is when you can turn around and say, I'm talking about a specific solution for you, but also this is exactly what we're doing on our inventory right here.
Right.
What's happening. That's better than any case study I could possibly imagine,
And it's still different because, like Dailymotion, like Dailymotion.com is purely video-based experiences, right? We don't necessarily have a ton of, editorial types of long form content in which video is being integrated across. So it's still not necessarily like, yeah, what works on Dailymotion is going to, work on your site. So I still think that's the beauty of it, and that there is still these ongoing like learning opportunities to learn what does work, what doesn't work, what features make sense, what doesn't make sense. Are you trying to leverage video to keep someone on a given article to consume that video over a span of 5-10 minutes? Or are you just trying to have video content on your page to say that you have video content and then now your sales team can go out and monetize, or bring that sort of monetization offering to different advertisers. So everybody has their own, I would say, motivations in regards to why they're leveraging video and how they're leveraging video. And it's just been beautiful to sort of understand and see the vast array, I would say, of ways in which publishers are doing that these days.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think you're a bit of a problem solver, right? Critical thinker when you're approaching some of these publishers. So as you're starting to see how your publishers are starting to evaluate video and utilize video and what Dailymotion is doing, how do you think, or how do you kind of foresee the future of video? Are there certain pieces that you're starting to recognize and say, all right, there's going to be a really big impact in, let's say, CTV, or maybe a mix between audio ads and CTV, something happening in between? What is a big target, or something that you as a director of publisher development and also Dailymotion are paying attention to?
For sure. I mean, everybody's seeing the explosive growth that CTV is having these days, right? I think that's going to continue to be a focus for certainly all of the major media entities out there. How can I continue to create an audience around this? I think some of the interesting things that we're going to sort of continue to see through that is the balance of subscription-based models versus AVOD models. I think that's going to be, especially because as a user, I mean, I told you I subscribe to every single streaming service.
Right.
I spend more money now on streaming than I did when I had cable. So realistically, I know part of this the beauty of CTV was the fact that like people were cutting the cord because they wanted to find cheaper alternatives to their traditional, linear cable subscriptions. So I think that's particularly unique, just to see, the growth of a lot of these different services, whether it's a more free-based model. I think Pluto is crushing it right now for Viacom CBS as a product. But then simultaneously, I think we just saw Crunchyroll the other day, which is more subscription-based, get scooped up by Sony for, billions of dollars as well. So, it's interesting to see how a lot of the different organizations are continuing to sort of explore the CTV realm. I think the other thing that everybody is probably hearing in the back of their minds as it relates to that is the overabundance of ad fraud that's going on in CTV. And, there's only so many people that have smart devices installed or a Fire Stick or an Apple TV or smart TVs or whatever it is. So I think that the industry at large is also going through this interesting, how do we solve for the verification component of making sure there's a real user at the end of this screen? And that's, for us, a lot of what we do. I know we partner with Human, formerly White Ops, sort of tackle some of those challenges. And for us, that's just, really important to make sure that at the end of the day, we do want to make sure that these experiences are being optimized and driven towards people, like actual people-based delivery, and understanding that this isn't just like 15 TVs in a warehouse somewhere that are just like streaming some content, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of deal. But, in addition to, I'd say like CTV, which is certainly, exploding, I think we're also getting to a point where now you're also starting to see companies emerge in the space that make it easier than ever for publishers to create video, right? You don't need a 10-person production team, green screens, and all of this to actually make meaningful content. In my previous spot when I was at Sport Radar, I think that was most evident, just seeing how many different sports publishers out there, are almost going down this type of podcast content type of route where, they can, it's someone talking about, something that's going on in the sports world, someone else behind their Zoom camera on a different part of the country, just having that chat with them, and then just, a little bit of production quality behind it. But it's not necessarily something that's taking, millions of dollars to create video at scale anymore. And I think that's the beauty of Zoom, right? As much as a lot of us hate the fact that this has been our main form of communication for the last year and a half with both colleagues and clients, right? But it's also created the opportunity for anybody to record and create content and not necessarily have to rely on expensive equipment to be able to do so.
100%. Yeah, completely agree. Well, that's a a really good segue into the one of the last questions for you, and that's advice for publishers. So I'd be interested to hear your take on, I mean, just as a whole, because I know we're talking about Dailymotion and video and that approach, but you've got a bunch of experience in the industry. So I don't want to pigeonhole you to just video, but you share whatever you'd like. But I'd love to hear some tips and advice for publishers trying to navigate the industry right now in 2021 post-COVID. Well, during COVID.
I'd say probably the most important thing, and this is coming from the experience I've had. So I've worked in ad operations, I've worked in product, I've worked in business development. So I've been able to sort of been lucky in the sense that I've been able to see the engineering components that go into a lot of this, the optimization levers that have to get pulled to get it to work correctly for particular publishers, as well as the sometimes frustrating things that you see in sales as it relates to, whether it's competing platforms or whatnot in regards to the pitches being made. And that's understand the metrics, understand the data that you have coming in. For example, I was chatting with a publisher, this was probably late last week. And I was just like, if you don't mind sharing, like, what are some benchmark CPMs that you're seeing? What are some benchmark fill rates that you're seeing? We'd just love to get an understanding. You have a unique mix of geographic distribution on your site. It wasn't purely US, so it was one where I was just more curious than anything. And the guy just comes back to me. He's like, yeah, we're being reported out a 325% fill rate. And I was just like, excuse me, could you repeat that again? Because fill rate is how many ads are being filled relative to the number of ad requests being filled. I thought that was particularly interesting because, that user or that person had initially really been seeing like a 40% fill rate, but what was being reported, in the dashboard was we served 3 ads per 1 page view,
right.
compared to 3 ads compared to 6 potential monetizable ad opportunities that were presented. Right. So I think that was particularly interesting because, don't get me wrong, the opportunity, I am not by any stretch against ad refresh or being able to serve advertorial content multiple times in between different pieces of video content kind of thing. But it's one where, there's 100% fill is the highest that you can go. Yeah. So it's one of those where it felt like that person was being dealt a very large disservice from essentially just being told that, you're seeing 325% fill, really it's 50%. So for them, they're just like, oh, well, we're 3x what we could ever achieve elsewhere. But realistically, it's like, well, technically you're only at 50% of potentially of what you might actually be able to achieve from a revenue generation standpoint. So I think that's important, like understanding the metrics, understanding how your partners are reporting out on those metrics. Former colleague of mine at Rev Content shared something similar that they had been experiencing earlier. So it definitely seems like it's an ongoing, thing in the industry, as it relates to, entities just really trying to see like, okay, how can I go ahead and get additional business? How can I structure things differently to sort of show that my product's better than another product, et cetera, when in reality, you're just defining things differently. Right. And it's kind of one of those where like, there should only be one definition of what fill rate is. There should only be one definition of what CPM is. There should only be one definition of what RPM is, all of the different acronyms that we play with in our industry, which there, as we all know, there are far too many of those. But just, making sure that as a publisher, as a media owner, that you are familiar with how one partner is reporting on that compared to another, that that understanding will allow you to make the appropriate decisions that are in the best interest of, making sure that you're optimizing your ad revenue as much as you possibly can. And then, I guess a second piece of advice is, besides obviously work with Dailymotion, create a Dailymotion channel, leverage our player technology across all of your experiences, is really diversify and test what type of content you're showing to people. Are your users engaging with long form, written editorial content? Are your users more interested in, short form video? Like, I'd rather just consume this 30-second clip than read something that's longer. For me personally, like taking the subway into Manhattan every so often, it's easier for me to read. I'm not popping in and out of like having service on my phone, not having service on my phone, the buffering that comes with trying to stream video during that. So I think it's really understanding who your audience is, how they're consuming your content, which will better at the end of the day influence what you end up putting out there, in your experience, which really is the core driver of your business, right? So we have publishers that we work with that are major broadcasters globally, in France or Brazil or where that might be. And their focuses as companies are very, very different from, for example, a publisher that has been trying to build their audience around social media platforms and capitalizing on traffic that's able to be acquired from those. It's a very different type of experience, a very different audience, and just different interests in regards to how people want to consume that content. So sort of being in tune with what resonates the most with your viewership, I think is going to be crucially important moving forward, especially because I think that we all realize like there's just more and more content being pumped into the world these days. Content on a lot of the streaming platforms is at such a premium, just to have high quality production level content. So to be able to understand, what that all entails from a resourcing perspective, is this worth it for what I'm trying to accomplish with my business? Or is it better off, us trying to leverage, our Facebook our Facebook audiences, our YouTube channel, our Dailymotion channel, et cetera. Those are the types of things that publishers specifically should just continue to always be working to better understand. Certainly I'd say a lot of people have a great grasp on what works for them. But I also think that it's one that, we've seen so many in 10 years, we've seen the rise of like 6 or 7 major social media platforms that have been trying to change the game. You have Facebook that is, not necessarily anywhere near the stranglehold of the internet that they had a decade ago, compared to TikTok, which, 3 years ago, nobody would have known what you were talking about. So it's one of those, I think that's the beauty of the internet, is that, any time that there comes to be a point, really like sort of this inflection point of, when you, and this is more so specific to video, but I read this yesterday, and it was anytime that it seems way more appealing for people to start figuring out, okay, how do I get this content for free? How do I pirate this content? How do I, that whenever that starts to become an appealing option is when there's really the proof that the industry is ripe for disruption there. Yeah. Right. So I think those are a few different things that I'd keep in mind: understanding your audience, understanding what content resonates with your audience, and for all the different providers that you work with, whether that's advertising related, whether they're fraud vendors, whether they are more so just, I guess what you'd call just like SaaS types of offerings, just like how can we help you create video content, or how can we help you, how can we help you optimize your CMS so that, your core web vitals are, you're operating at, 99, sort of Google page speed insight score compared to what you might have. Understanding how each one of those entities is sort of measuring and reporting out on a lot of that will allow you to make better data-driven decisions, because realistically, at the end of the day, data's king. And you can't, the numbers don't lie. So I think those are some important things to always keep in mind, that regardless of how beautiful a shiny object sort of feature or capability, sounds, what's behind that, and sort of don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, 100%. And those were pieces of advice for publishers, especially like understanding their inventory really at a high level, understanding what's actually going on behind the closed doors kind of thing. Another thing that kind of stuck out to me was the piece on the reporting, that 325% fill rate. It is on the publisher to understand, but I would take that as also a call out to SSP and other providers to, like, transparency here should be the rule, not the exception. And I think that is where
100%.
That's where we kind of sit in the industry right now, is that we're still trying to figure things out. I think it's maybe encouraged Google's MCM switch recently in terms of policy, right? So a lot of stuff regarding ad fraud and transparency is starting to become or starting to be forced upon people because it hasn't been the rule. So I think that's a solid takeaway too. It's a call out for other people in the industry outside of just
for sure.
That was really solid. I like the answer.
And it's also interesting, right? Like, I would say, for how fragmented media can be and the advertising world at large can be, in the past couple of years, I would say that, like, I'm relatively impressed with the amount of people that have adopted ads.txt, app ads.txt, and some of those other initiatives, right?
Yeah.
But going back to the provider side, it seems like stuff like sellers.json, et cetera, are being adopted at a slower pace than publishers have been adopting some of this type of stuff. So I think it's crucial for whether you're a publisher, media company, whether you're a service provider, ad tech entity, really, as best practices do start to get rolled out within the space, it's one where everybody needs to sort of take a look and sort of make sure that they are adopting those best practices, that transparency is at the forefront of what they're trying to do. Because I think you're also at this interesting point on the buy side, right? Where, you have traditional brands that would have just gone to, agencies, been like, here's $1 million, find me people that are going to buy my product, right? They're getting way more intelligent in regards to how they're allocating their budgets, so for them, it's super important to understand, okay, well, what impact, like, okay, viewability, how are you just defining viewability? I still find it relatively interesting that we have an IAB standard, that there's a group M standard, that there's and other industry bodies have these different varying metrics in regards to some of these things. But it's definitely one where it's great that we do have a lot of companies coming in trying to solve a lot of the issues that we have had, right? And I think probably none more right now than the whole identity question, right? Do we rely on context? Do we rely on contextual? Like, there's nothing wrong with targeting a Heinz ketchup ad to food websites, right? Like, and I think we've all seen a lot of the different case studies and stuff that show that type of targeting is cheaper and more efficient and more effective. Compared to Josh, who loves Topo Chico now, who he is a X-year-old male residing in Y location, I'm going to serve, that type of thing. I think, as privacy has just become so much more of an important focus, and not only in the ad tech industry, right? But like this is like global. This is talking global, like country level, regional level legislation. GDPR, CCPA. Brazil has their own privacy regulations getting rolled out, and it only seems to be continuing in that trend, to make sure that the capabilities and offerings from different ad tech providers, companies in the MarTech realm, what are they doing in regards to how are they spending your dollars as a buyer?
Right.
Right. So you have Brand Direct now, they're starting to take a lot of stuff in-house. So now these, people, who used to work at agencies, ad tech companies are now ending up on the brand side of things, sort of being able to bring that level of expertise to, a Procter and Gamble or, other, major advertisers out there, to sort of solve this. Like, for us, we've been sending these dollars to X platform, and then X platform spends these dollars on these 50 different companies. I think a lot of the beauty of what we've seen sort of Brand Direct is those brands now being able to understand that full funnel of how do I reach my user? Because previously I was giving money to this company, and this company would understand how all of these users react.
Right.
But they were one step away from their customer. So you have all of these ad tech and martech organizations that know all of these different consumer behaviors. Where are they going before they consume this content? What are exactly their different paths to conversion, that now brands, as they're starting to in-house, are starting to see some of the rewards from that as well. Right. Because now they go, oh, like I have a way better understanding of our consumers since we started doing this ourselves compared to leveraging partner X, Y, or Z. Right. So I think that's some of the other beauty of the space. And I know this is ad tech, and beauty might not be the word that most people use to describe this, right?
Right.
But compared to what it was, or compared to how, I guess, disjointed and fragmented it could be, it's just great starting to see some major players in the space trying to reshift the focus towards what's important. And that's brands having a connection with their target audience. That's transparency, openness, and understanding in the ad tech martech space in regards to what value are you actually driving your given partners, right? I think there's probably maybe like a year and a half ago now, we saw the whole like $1 gets spent programmatically, 21 cents gets paid to the publisher. Like, what's going on with the other 79 cents? Those are things that are continuing to be worked on in the space. And I don't think that there was a solution that was rolled out overnight that all of a sudden solves all of the problems that people are facing, right? But I think, a lot of the different organizations and councils that have sort of, evolved, within ad tech specifically, have done a great job, at least in these initial first steps, of trying to come up with a more, systemic way to sort of address some of these historical issues in ad tech, right? And I think at the end of the day, so long as if buyers and advertisers are seeing better performance and better conversion, and publishers at the end of the day get to see a little bit more, of the revenue pie that they think they deserve, like obviously that's a win-win situation. And I think the organizations, in our space that do the best to offer those benefits to each of those sides, those are the ones that are going to come out on top.
Yeah, 100%. So for the publishers that definitely want to connect with you now, and also Dailymotion, what's the easiest way to connect?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're certainly a publisher, media company, you can obviously chat with me, and I can certainly provide my email there, nicholas.cote at dailymotion.com. But simultaneously, if you want, you can just go to dailymotion.com, publishers.dailymotion.com, advertisers.dailymotion.com, and just sort of see for yourself, like, what are some of the things that we're sort of doing in the space? What are some of the problems we're trying to solve for video? A lot of the value that we bring from Dailymotion is focused on, you have your audience on your property, right? How can you get eyeballs to your content outside of that, right? I think part of the challenge these days isn't necessarily how do I get my CPM from $2 to $2.50, but how do I get my audience from 100,000 monthly viewers to 1 million monthly viewers, right? It's one where the scale of audience development can vastly outweigh a small 5% incremental increase in CPM anywhere on any given ad unit. So for some of the things that we're trying to tackle, distributing your content both on dailymotion.com, helping you create syndication opportunities to serve your content across a variety of other third-party publishers to get your name and brand out there. I think those are some of the things that we're sort of seeing a lot of success with as it relates to finding our value proposition within the space. So it's not only about a CPM at the end of the day. Look at the entire, revenue is at the top, right? What goes into revenue? Audience, advertising, and when I say audience, I mean both on an O&O domain. What are you doing in social? I think over the past few years, we've seen the explosion of the importance of newsletters, right? Something that was so, I'd say, traditionally just like overlooked, or like people are like, oh, newsletters don't mean anything. Like, I open my front office sports newsletter every day. Right? It's one of those where like people want, and it's figuring out which type of way are you connecting with your audience and what's resonating the most with them. And then you should find what's working and then just double down on that. But sorry, a little tangent off of the how to connect with me at Dailymotion. But at the end of the day, dailymotion.com, top right-hand corner, you can click to sign up, upload your content. And by all means, we're obviously certainly happy to chat further and see how we can help better distribute publishers' content throughout the space.
Cool. Thank you. Well, everybody, thank you for watching or listening this Friday.
Yes, thank you.
If you've got any questions, comments for Nick or myself, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. All of Nick's information will also be in the description section below. Hope everybody has a great rest of your Friday. Nick, thanks for jumping on.
Josh, thanks again, man. And thank you, everyone.